Mike Smerklo, you are the founder of Next Coast Venture, a venture capitalist firm that invests in entrepreneurs building disruptive technology. And you are the author of Mr. Monkey and Me, a real survival guide for entrepreneurs. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So, Mike, I've been reading the book. It's very encouraging. It's eye-opening for entrepreneurs because, of course, it's not full of BS like many other books. We don't need to know what Mark Zuckerberg eats for breakfast or what. So you open our eyes to the real life of an entrepreneur, real challenges, and this is quite appreciated. It is, as you mentioned, this is not a subject that people teach in textbooks. They don't teach this in school. This is something that you have to learn in the school of hard knocks. And sometimes we learn it too late. we
Yep.
we learn it with a knockout that put us out of business. So it's nice to learn from experiences like the ones that you have lived before. I wonder if we could start, of course, with your past, know where you're coming from, what got you started into this journey of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. I talk about this in the book in Mr. Monkey. I grew up in a very challenging economic situation. The only things I really saw as a child were disease, divorce, and economic challenges. So I was fortunate to get educated. I went to undergrad at Miami University. I came out and I started. My first job was a CPA of all things. So I was an accountant. I hated the job within probably 36 hours on the job. I realized I was in the wrong job, but I learned a lot. Then I went to investment banking for Lehman Brothers when there wasn't Lehman Brothers, another kind of soul-sucking job, but one that I learned a lot, made more money than I ever thought possible. Then I went and got my MBA at Northwestern, and then I moved out to Silicon Valley in the late 90s.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's um I wonder, you are the only one in your family who finished college. So I wanted to know a little bit about your background. How come your family didn't have anybody else going to college, and what gave you the initiative and the mental toughness to say, okay, I'm not going to follow the route that everybody else is following. I'm going to finish and pay for my own education.
Yeah, I don't, it's a great question. I don't know why I was the only one. I do think, and I talk about it in the book, is there is the mental aspect of it. Just not, we didn't have role models around. Everyone it wasn't just my immediate family, my uncles, my aunts. There really wasn't someone you could point to and say, yeah, I want to go be like Fred or Sally. So I don't know why I had an older brother, older sister, some challenging life circumstances did not give them the opportunity. I just knew that I wanted to do something. And I think if there was one real driver, my mother, who passed away 15 years ago, would say to me simply, just get educated. And so she had been a dental hygienist, single mother, had seen, I think, maybe some potential in me, but I think mostly, like great mothers do, just harped on me that I needed to go get educated. And that was probably the first driver. And then it was just, once I saw a little bit of the glimmer outside of the world I'd grown up with, I realized how big the world was compared to what I've been living in. And then it was just do whatever I took. So I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college, and then eventually got a degree.
Well, I have interviewed a few other entrepreneurs, and this is a common story. The person who grows up in poverty and that had a very negative environment, and all of a sudden they say, okay, I want something better for myself. We spoke about before starting the interview about JV McCormick, which is the CEO of Scribe Media.
Yep.
And he also grew up, his father was a pimp with prostitutes, and his mother was just an orphan. And he himself, he said, okay, enough of this. I don't. I want something better for myself. I wonder if this is a special breed of individuals who see the surrounding, they don't like what they see, and somehow they take that initiative to change their life.
I think so. And I think the hardest thing, and it's actually why I wrote the book, just not to continue to bring on the book, but the reason I wrote the book is I think it's mental. And listen, I'm still, I can talk about challenging. I'm still a reasonably tall white man who grew up in America in the 70s. So I still had it better than most in the world. I want to call that out. But I think part of it is just having the mental tenacity to say, I'm going to do something different. But then the hard part is trying to find a role model, or what does different mean? And in my case, it was simple to say, go get educated. So, okay, that means go to college. But I think the other challenge is not only having the fortitude to break out, but then trying to model yourself or put focus on something somewhere different. What is different? What does it look like? And that really is a difficult challenge for a lot of folks.
Okay, and then you work three jobs. I mean, it could have been so easy to give up. I'm just gonna, this job is enough for me to pay the rent. It's good school. I mean, many people make it without education. I already know enough to make a living. So the other thing is not only getting started, but continue going unto the end.
Yeah, what I found out about myself, and I talk about this really just self-awareness, is I wanted to I like challenges. I like to push myself. And that was something. I played sports when I was a kid. It's just something I enjoyed. And I started to channel it more professionally to continue to say, okay, what skills do I need? What other areas of my life would I like to develop? Who are people who can help me? I think a lot of that early on in my career then continued to push me forward until I finally got the courage to jump into the pool and try my hand at entrepreneurship myself.
Wow. Okay, and you not only you finished college, but you also got an MBA. Let me ask you, in today's day, when anyone can learn whatever they want to through YouTube or through, there are even free university classes through the computer. How necessary is it to go to a formal means of education? I mean, you could just go open the MIT website, and there are all the lectures for free.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, one, what an amazing opportunity for us to have education be at the fingertips of so many more people. So it candidly takes away a lot of excuses, because if you want to learn something, you want to learn to play piano, I want to learn to speak Spanish, um, I could go do that by the touch of a keyboard. So that's great. I would say that on the formal education, I'm not an expert on this. I do think in this current day, if you're thinking about going to college or not going to college, it still is, the college degree is still the stamp of approval that most employers look to. I don't think that's going to be there forever, but I think for the next decade, I would probably go, if that's your question, I'd probably go get a formal education, supplement it with online, or learn other things. But today, the employers are still going to look to say, did you get through university? Did you get some level of academic achievement as a stamp of approval?
Right. Okay. So that's if you're looking, first of all, if you're looking for a regular job.
Yep.
But in spite of that, I mean, we know now that Google and Apple is not making it a requirement to have a university degree.
Yeah. Well, because I think that what's great about that, and this is where I think the big shift is happening, there's certain skill sets, and programming is certainly one of them, where you can test competency without a degree. So you could be a phenomenal programmer without ever going to any university. And so I think in those attributes, I think it's the softer skills probably hard. If you're get a degree in sociology or in literature, maybe you have some stamps of approval, but I just think it's some way to show your competency, however that is, whatever that field requires.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Great. So you finish your education and you got a job that you didn't like, right? You knew that right from the beginning. So then what happened?
So I did that job for 2.5 years. It was one of those jobs where I was learning business. And I think it was one of those jobs you come out, and back to the role model. I got to be in the business world for 2 years and suddenly started to pick up mannerisms, learn formally and informally. I then got another job before business school. And it was that time when I started to think, okay, I've actually got some education. I've got some formal training. I didn't love it. As I said, it kind of sucked my soul away. I knew there was something more I wanted to do. I just didn't know exactly what it was. So I moved to California in the late 90s. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, wasn't sure how. So a really good mentor of mine said, "Why don't you go work for a startup?" And I just by pure happenstance happened to go work for two of the greatest entrepreneurs in the history of technology, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. They were starting a company called LoudCloud, and I was one of those employees. So I did that for 2 years. That company went public, and then I left to go start my own company.
Okay. So you had two great mentors, and you, yes, by osmosis, you can learn a lot. Uh, but to build the courage to start your own thing, I mean, people get addicted to a paycheck. I mean, the pandemic got here, people lost their job, and they couldn't imagine that they could create a job for themselves. They had to, I don't know, get on the waiting line to look for another job. But you decided, okay, I had enough of this. I'm going to be on my own. Can you tell us about the mindset required to go on your own instead of looking for the next job?
Yeah, well, I think I laugh because I read about. I think sometimes maybe it's a combination of, I don't know, it's arrogance or confidence or enthusiasm. I also think, fortunately, it's a little bit like writing a book. Had I known how hard it was going to be an entrepreneur, I'm not sure I would have done it. Had I known how hard it was going to be to write a book, I wouldn't have done that either. So there's part of it that's ignorance is bliss. But really, in all this is in my core, I have a fundamental belief that I wanted to help mold a business. I wanted to go run a business, lead a business, inspire employees, hopefully, and build something different. That was the driver. It was a kind of a goosebump moment that's hard to describe, but I really wanted to help grow and create something that was the final push, if you will, into the swimming pool. And then once I got in, I went, "Holy blank, what have I done?" But that's part of the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, and you had to face your fears, your demons. I mean, there is always a little bit of, oh, how am I gonna pay the bills? Or if I have employees, how am I gonna pay having employees is more frightening than being on your own, because all of a sudden you are responsible for somebody else's food on the table. Like that you could be hungry for an evening and you can be okay. But once you have employees, it's even a higher level of responsibility. So, did you had a talk with Mr. Monkey on your shoulder and figure things out?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I figured it out, but the joke. So the book is all about this fake character. I call him a frenemy, Mr. Monkey, and it really was for me the voice that of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And my joke is like he was in here right beforehand, right before this podcast. He said, "No one's gonna listen to this. Who wants to hear you?" Right? But that's
Well,
the
he
voice.
was right. My podcast.
No, 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 not about you. Not about you. He said all your other guests people love, but they're going to give me the thumbs down. No, but it's something I've had to deal with, and I think why I wrote the book is that voice for me has never gone away. Over time, I've learned to manage it and deal with it, and there's a formula I put forth in the book. But to your point, it wasn't one, oh, what have I done moment. It was almost every day. And I think if you really, to your joke about when I make the joke about what does Mark Zuckerberg eat for breakfast, that doesn't do anything for you. What really matters is that you get up every day, you look at the demon or the monkey or whatever it is in the mirror and say, I'm going to keep going. Because I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs come unraveled when they're starting a business, when they're growing the business, or even some of the most successful entrepreneurs don't know how to handle the success. And we've seen that in some of the high profile Silicon Valley blowups where, again, that mental side of it really starts to take over. And that's what the book's all about. But I never, to be clear, for the record, I never put that voice away. It's always been next to me.
Okay, so you had a talk with your monkey friend. You were able to start that business. Can you tell us then about the growth? First of all, finding the business, because it's a special. The way you did it is unorthodox. I
Yep.
think it's
Yep.
unorthodox, and then how it grew.
Yeah, well, great question. So I wanted to run a business, and I joke in the book. The only problem is I didn't have an idea. So there's this very unorthodox, it's a great word for it, called a search fund, which basically I raised a little bit of money from some people I knew that had money. I didn't, to go look for a business to buy. I basically started out cold calling, emailing, cold calling thousands of businesses, and I fortunately found a business in California that was doing a couple million of revenue. I was able to raise capital to buy that. I had a business partner at the time. We worked together for about 4 years, and then I ran it for 12 years. And I took it from the business was a couple million when I started, when I bought it, and by the time I retired, it was almost 300 million in revenue. Had 3,000 employees around the world. Was a publicly traded company. So I got to run the full gamut from startup, 30 people at the time, so not super small, but still 30 people, all the way up to 3,000 and all the emotional roller coasters that go with it.
Wow. How is it? How difficult or how difficult or easy it is to have a co-founder or a partner to to manage things?
Yeah, well, so I think it all depends on the person. Like I'm a big believer at Next Coast Ventures, the venture firm I co-founded in Austin, Texas. I've got a co-founder. I personally have found it to be a great thing for me professionally. It kind of comes down to knowing yourself. Some people are in the mindset of I want to be the boss. I don't want to have to, have to deal with a partner. To me, I think I'm a little bit I'm a high energy, very optimistic person, and that's a good thing. But at times, it tends to have to for me to have a counterbalance. So I had a wonderful partner, a gentleman named David Kennedy. He and I we were co-CEOs for 4 years, and then he retired. And then for the next 8 years, I was the CEO. But I personally have always found a partner to be a much better way for me to operate. But it all depends. Everyone's
Right.
different.
Okay. So now, congratulations, you sell this business. You got a nice chunk of cash. You have enough to just sip margaritas for the rest of your life. Why continue the stress of waking up early, dealing with people, having responsibility, being on the hook for somebody else's livelihood some more?
Yeah, well, for me, again, one sanity. I love my job. First of all, I don't really think of it as a job, and I think that's where we're all trying to get to. I think too many people have a pipe dream that someday I'll retire. I see so many early retired folks that are miserable because they don't know what to do with themselves. In my case, I have the absolute pleasure of working with amazing entrepreneurs. I get to see exciting new innovations and get to help entrepreneurs, hopefully, with both capital and expertise. So for me, it's something I love to do, and it's an honor and thrilled to do it. But secondly, I just feel like contributing. If that's what I get my energy from. So sipping margaritas every once in a while is fun, but not something I want to do full time.
Right. Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about your new business then?
Yeah, so the started a venture firm 5 years ago. It's headquartered in Austin, Texas. It's called Next Coast Ventures. We invest in early stage technology companies. Typically, in the venture world, they tend to be a couple of years old. Series A, Series B investments, and we've invested, I think, in over 50 different companies. We've got $250 million under management, and just an amazing group of entrepreneurs that, again, we're just thrilled to be able to work with every day.
Wow. So okay, so I have two questions in regards to that. I just finished reading a book called $1 Billion Loser, which is the story of Adam Newman and WeWork. Okay,
Yeah.
now this guy he has a regular real estate business. Okay, but through his charisma and his art of public speaking and his salesmanship, he managed to get investor to get to pay up to 10 times the regular value of a business of this kind. So the question is, how much is it for someone asking you for money? Where do you draw the line between the charisma, the what you call it, being able to eat glass versus the business plan? Because like Adam Newman, he was able to convince some sophisticated investors, J.P. Morgan, for example, and there were a whole list of people. So you get to see a lot of people asking you for money. Where do you draw that line? Or to that moment, he is the charisma, the character, the willingness to eat the glass, and where does he stop making sense?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I wish there was an easy answer. And I know the partner from Benchmark who invested in WeWork was on my board for 11 years. I talk about in the book. He's one of the smartest, best humans I know, Bruce Dunleavy. And so I know I've talked to Bruce about it, and I understand the challenges of it. I don't know enough about that case in particular, but to your question, when we're looking at companies, it's how big is the market, how disruptive is the solution, and then it really does come down to the entrepreneur. And the question you're asking is the hardest one to gauge because you do want that. I don't know, charisma is probably the wrong word, but the glass eating, the term we use, and I appreciate you sharing it, is it just testifies or signifies how hard you're going to have to work. I think the line that gets stepped over too much, and I do think it has to do with mental tenacity, is it's hard. I mean, you think about this guy from WeWork, right? He's a young guy, relatively young guy. The amount of money that became his in such a short period of time would be hard for anyone to handle. then you throw in ego and all that stuff, it's easy to lose your way. And that's why when I talk about the mental side of it and the shape formula in the book, I say it's not just for starting out for entrepreneurs, it's how do you keep yourself sane when things go wrong, but also when they go right. There's a lot of studies that show professional athletes, et cetera, when you actually achieve your goal, sometimes that's the hardest thing to deal with. And that's mental tenacity, and it's hard.
Wow. Yeah, a little bit of personal finance here. Most millionaires, from athletes to artists, as soon as they stop working, within 5 years, they become broke. An example comes from Mike Tyson, for example, who,
Yeah.
after he, I don't know, stopped fighting, he was broke within a few years.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's not enough mental maturity.
yeah, there's an old saying, I don't know who it is, but I love it. It says, when you're climbing the ladder, make sure you know where it's going, because you might just get there, and make sure it's going to the roof that you want to get to. And I think that speaks to it, because you can get there. I thought would make me happy, and I talk about in this book. At some point early on, it was like, well, if I get to this level, or I have this many employees, or I make this much money, then I'll be happy. And that's a fool's errand. And it really does come through, experience to go, okay, that's not what's going to make the difference. It really doesn't. But a lot of times that's what people believe it is, and that gets them in real trouble.
Okay, doing some research, I found out that you see a lot of people per year. What, 700 people or 1,000 people? How do you how do you manage? You have appointments all throughout the days in order to study all these deals? Or tell us a little bit about the life of a venture capitalist.
It's a really funky job. I would say that, yeah, we see in anywhere between 500 to 1,000 companies pitch us a year, and sometimes it's a quick pass and not a fit for us, but a lot of times it's in person, and we select 3 or 4 a year. And the worst part about my job is I say no 99.9% of the time, and there's a whole reason. There's 100 reasons why I say no. So it is Dr. No is the job, but the typical day is, and you've got this range of things you have to look at. You've got new opportunities to invest, which is what everyone thinks about. But we also have investors in our fund, and I want to make sure I'm managing them and providing information. And then I've got all the companies that I'm on the board of, some which are working, some that are not. And so you really have this interesting time management. And I could spend every waking hour helping my portfolio companies or trying to help them. And I can spend just as much time looking at new opportunities. So it really is an interesting balancing act. But having said that, it's an incredibly fun job. It really
Uh,
is. I'm blessed.
okay, and then how do you manage to sit down and write a book, Mr. Monkey and Me? How is that even
Yeah.
possible?
Well, I'm fortunate. I say in the acknowledgments, I'm fortunate to have an amazing wife and 4 amazing children, because this was usually done on Saturday mornings. What I would usually do is wake up early on Saturday, Sunday morning, or in the evenings. But I also love it. It was an incredibly interesting creative challenge. I'd written blog posts before, but putting together a book is something I always wanted to do. So it was usually spare time, flights when we were traveling, just grabbing time whenever I could.
Okay, can you give us then a short summary? I mean, every one of my listeners is gonna go and buy the book after they finish hearing this episode. But could you give them a taste? What can they find in the book? And also give us more detail about the shape formula.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I have to mention that all proceeds go to charity. I set up a scholarship for diverse and underrepresented students interested in entrepreneurship. So, anyone who does a book, I really appreciate it, and know that that's going to fund, I think, a very worthy cause. So, that's first and foremost. It's available on Amazon, and all the information. I've got a great quiz about mental tenacity on my website, mikesmerklo.com. So, that's the preamble. About the book, it is about the mental aspect of entrepreneurship. It tells some funny, embarrassing, cringeworthy stories of things I saw from watching great entrepreneurs, from my own experience, and from working with amazing entrepreneurs today. And it culminates in the SHAPE formula. And the SHAPE formula is it's a very simple acronym for attributes which I found either personally or through osmosis, as you said earlier, watching other entrepreneurs, what it takes to have the mental strength to be successful.
Okay, and can you just tell us what shape stands
Sure.
for?
Yeah, so first is it's somewhat of a like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not exactly pyramidal, but it works that way. First is S is for self-awareness. That's about understanding yourself, your strengths and weaknesses. By doing that, then you can go to H, which is help. Where do you get help? Remember that anything you're trying to do in life, someone somewhere has already done it. So your job is to try and seek them out. Help then leads to A, which is authenticity. And there's been a bunch of books written about it, but really talks about finding your authentic leadership voice, which then leads to P is persistence. Anyone who's going to go into this endeavor know that it's a hard, long journey and you need to be persistent. And then E is expectations. So it really wraps around having the right expectations around what the journey is and what it isn't, and how to stay the course as you move through it.
Okay, so my last question: do we ever kill the monkey, or do we learn to be roommates?
Oh, roommates, and imagine go back to your wherever you had your worst roommate and times 10. That's the monkey, at least in my voice. But I do talk about, even, I joke, but in all seriousness, getting ready for a podcast. Oh, what am I going to talk about? Writing the book. Is anybody going to read it? That's the same voice. But I think starting to recognize it like you do other voice, understand what it is and what it isn't, and somehow bringing it to your own benefit is the real judo trick.
Wow.
Easy to say, hard to do.
I wonder if there is any questions that I neglected to ask you, or if there is anything else that you would like to add to this conversation.
No, it's been wonderful. I really appreciate it. It's great questions. I mean, I guess the one thing I do push on is that the world needs entrepreneurs now more than ever. It's probably the hardest time to be an entrepreneur, right? You've got COVID, you've got work from home, you've got social unrest, you've got all this stuff. It's such a challenging job, and I have such admiration for anyone who goes down the path. That's why I wrote the book, and I hope anyone who reads it gets something out of it, and maybe gets out of the shower and goes after their dream.
Uh, in one question in regards to that, I I get a sense from time to time that there is a pushback against entrepreneurship. We are portrayed sometimes as greedy bastards who all we care about is money, and it's hard sometimes to portray or to highlight the value that entrepreneurs add to society. I wonder, I mean, you live in a bubble, you live with people pitching you ideas all the time. They probably tell you, because you are the man with the money, how great your help is, but I wonder if you get to see any of that pushback in your environment.
Yeah, I mean, you see it. I understand it. Sometimes it can be viewed that. I would say that anyone who's going into entrepreneurship for the financial rewards is going to be is quickly disappointed because you're just not going to make it. It's too damn. If that's the only thing that's motivating you, it's a wonderful side benefit, but that's the only thing motivating you. I see some of the pushback more in the media and other places, but then I go back and say, let's think about COVID, a global pandemic. Do you want to bet on an entrepreneur to solve that problem or a not-for-profit or government entity? Nothing against those. They do wonderful work for certain parts of our society. But time and time again, I'll bet on the courage, tenacity, and strength of an entrepreneur to solve big problems. You
Wow.
educate, I mean, you think about the things that are facing the society, I'd rather bet on entrepreneur to solve any of them, from global warming, poverty, to education. So
Yeah.
and then, fortunately I get to do that in my day job.
Perfect, Mike. Okay, can you tell us one last time the name of your book and where people can follow you? Because I see you write a blog and your blog follows the same language as the book.
Yeah, so the book is Mr. Monkey and Me. It's available on Amazon as of a couple of weeks ago. All my social is Mike Smerklo. It's Smerklo. My site is mikesmerklo.com, and that's my tag on all the major socials. And as I mentioned before, the website I think has some really good resources for entrepreneurs. It's got a quiz. You can also download a free chapter of the book to see if it's something you might be interested in.
Mike, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Lon. I really appreciate it.